Yeah.
Hello, you. Long time no see. Yes, I've been busy traveling across the UK, working on projects and supervising our project in Nigeria as well. But I'm back here today and I promised you guys I was going to be walking you through the 5 different steps how you're able to start your project and complete it, and that's what we're about to do today. So if you're joining into my channel for the first time, I am Gunan Ioron-Aloho and I am a project manager, a lawyer and a development worker. So basically I work in designing and delivering projects across the development space and the business space as well. And on this channel today, I'm going to be walking you through the 5 phases of project management, which is from project initiation up until your project close. So move with me. So, what have I been doing in the past couple of days? I've been traveling across the UK, working with different people in different locations to deliver different projects. And I recently got into the campaigning and influencing group with the Young Women Trust. That's been an amazing journey so far. And we're creating a project to debate discrimination that women are encountering in their workspaces in the UK. And I'm hoping to take all of the learnings from there and replicate back home in Nigeria as well with our non-profit organization and also in all of the other different spaces where I work. So back to the debate for today. What are we doing today? So we're going to walk through the project management phase, and the way I'm going to do this will be in a very simple way that you're able to really understand. I'm going to be using a personal project that I did for myself, very personal project. So I'm going to be talking to you about how I was able to get admission for my master's, but I'm going to walk you through it as though you're building a project. So you'll visualize it. It looks very easy because it's a personal thing I did, and you could also have very personal things you do as well that you can start thinking of them as project. And basically you then start thinking and designing bigger projects. But I'm using this technique for you to really understand what goes into project stage and how you're able to close up your project. So let's get into it. So in 2021, early 2021, I started debating around, oh, I want to travel for my master's, where do I go to, and all of that. So all of the things I was doing within this stage was the project initiation. So I was thinking, what are the ideas that I have around this project, around me traveling abroad for my studies? What schools do I want to go to? What courses do I want to read? So certain things in your project initiation will be your ideas, the validation for those ideas, your idea selection. What makes you pick a particular idea over a different type of idea, right? And then you now start looking. So for me in this scenario, basically, I was now looking at what courses align with my program, basically, that I would want to study abroad for. So because I have a law background, I was looking at things around the law space, around policy and business management as well. So I have 3 top courses that I wanted to study. So I outlined the international human rights law, outlined social policy and business management. That's the master's in business administration. So I have these 3 different courses and I started doing a research around these 3 different courses, which was more important, which was good for a certain environment, what benefits I would gain from either of those, and which of them would really help me to get a better job in the development space or in the business space if that was where I wanted to go into. So I started looking at all of these things and then looking at the countries as well. So for business management, for example, where will it be more lucrative? Will it be the US? Will it be Canada? Will it be the UK? Where will I be more successful as someone who has studied social policy? Now I was also looking at, for all of these schools basically, where will I get the most scholarship? Where will I be able to afford the school fees? What is the prospect of me getting a job immediately after I finish my studies? So I looked around all of this area, and this is like your feasibility study. So you're checking the reason, it's like you're having your pitch as well. Like, this is the reason why you should do a particular course. This is the reason why you should launch a particular project. So I was doing the feasibility study at this point, which was more important, which is more lucrative, which is going to set me up and get me into the space that I really wanted to. And then I made a choice. So I was now between, okay, I'm going to do either international human rights law or I'm going to do social policy, because these 2 were like really connected to my law background already. And some of the courses that the universities that I was looking at, they had like more funding for those courses as well. MBA is so expensive, so I didn't even really look at that part. So this was the validation for the idea that I was choosing for my program, right? And then I selected these 2 courses and I was going to run around with it and then just see basically where I would go to from there. And then I started looking at Canada, I was looking at US, I was looking at UK. And then because I graduated with a third class degree, right? It was difficult in a way for me to say, oh, I was going to Canada and I needed funding and all of that at the time, because there were so many things that I also didn't know at that stage. So I was now looking between basically US and Canada. So at this point, I had strike like Canada off my list. This again is your validation. This again is you conducting your feasibility studies. And at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, US and UK. But amongst these 2 countries, where did I really want to go to? And I was looking at other personal things. I am married and I wanted to really relocate with my spouse. So will I be able to relocate to the US with my spouse? So these were like other reasons again that now influenced my decision and be like, oh, okay, so UK is like the it place for me to go to if I wanted to travel with my spouse and if I really needed to excel in this particular field. So the US had more courses in international human rights law that I would have loved, and I was able to get scholarship in there as well. But I then looked at the UK based on some of the things I needed to do. So in the first instance, I was really working with the 2 ideas, but this was how I was able to select and say this is what I'm going with. So this was my initiation, and then I had now selected this particular idea that this is what I'm running with. When I'd done all of these things, I was like, okay, if I'm starting this school search now and I want to go into this school, I want to study my master's, what time am I really doing this? Again, in the last time I told us something about project, right? A project is something that is temporal. So a project is not something that you do till that kingdom come. It's something that has a start date and an end date. So for my own master's, I was checking out, okay, maybe I should be able to travel by 2021 September. I should be done with my master's by 2022, latest 2023. Those was like the time rate that I had given myself. And then I had a time as well as to when I needed to resume school and all of those things, what activities I needed to follow through with, and then how much funding basically was I looking to get for myself to do certain things. So I had all of this idea running through my mind. And then I was able to design something called a project charter, not in the real sense of it, but obviously as a project manager, you'll need to design your project charter. So this basically telling you what your objectives are, like for your project, what is the goal. So the goal for me was relocating. The goal was for me actually gaining a master's degree in a particular course, which would set me up and then put me in a better position for my future career. So those are like the things that I was looking up to. And then I had concluded all of this, written all of this thing down, written like my start time, my end time. And then I moved into the planning stage, which is your second phase of project management. What do you do in project planning phase? So in this stage, basically, I was now looking at fleshing out some of the ideas that I had in the initiation point. So I had an overall view of how much I was going to spend because I had looked at all of the government portals for the countries that I wanted to go to. How much does a master's student need to have? How much do you need to pay for your accommodation, for your school fees, and all of those things? I had like a rough idea. I was already thinking of the risks even in the initiation part as well. Like, what could go wrong? It could be that I don't get the admission. I had a third class, so I might not even get a scholarship. So there were a lot of risks that were associated with that, and I had just like written a list of all of those things. But I didn't flesh any of those things out. When I came into the project planning stage, that was where I was now developing like document. What are the risks associated with me relocating? Losing contact with friends, with families, maybe a lot of funds. I might not be able to self-fund myself if I don't get a scholarship. I might not be able to get a scholarship because of my grades, all of those kind of things. And at this point, I didn't even have like my transcript from school yet, so there might be delays in that as well. So many other reasons. So I had written all of these things down in what is called a risk assessment matrix. So what's the certainty that this particular thing is going to occur? What's the mitigation plan for it? So for me, basically, now seeing that I might not be able to get a scholarship, my mitigation plan for that was that if there is no scholarship, I will have to self-fund. How am I going to self-fund? I was already looking at platforms. I could do a crowdfunding. I could ask friends and family for support. All of those different things. I could sell out a book. I could start out my project management course and raise funds through there as well. So I was thinking of these different mediums, right? So that was my risk assessment. Then you have your communication plan as well. So how was I going to communicate with the schools? For me to reach out to schools to get admission, I needed to submit applications. I needed to be in contact with them, asking questions about different things, right? And how was I also going to communicate with like maybe my friends, my family, every single person who was associated with basically me the situation where I was going to get admission and study abroad, who are like my stakeholders. So in this fighting project, you always talk about stakeholders. For this as well, I had stakeholders. Stakeholders is anyone who is connected to your project, who is either going to make or break your project. And then for me, my family were like key stakeholders for me, because I needed their support in every single area of whatever I was basically working on to do. And then my friends as well, the schools were stakeholders for me, because I was going to really be writing to them and all of that. And for the schools, basically, if they don't give me admission, there was nothing that I could do about that. So they were my stakeholders. People that I was looking up to for support were my stakeholders at the point as well. And I've listed all of these people down, maybe airlines that I would use, maybe all of those kind of things. And then I now went to what is the project plan document in itself. So I now started listing out all of the schools that I needed to also write to. This is my stakeholder management document now. I wanted to apply to 3 schools in the US. I wrote them down. I did a research on them, wrote the best medium of communication for them as well. I then went into schools in the UK, wrote down the schools that I wanted with the different courses that they had, why I wanted them. And then I was looking at their requirements basically. So for every school, you have requirements. So for some of them, they might not be able to admit someone with a third class. For some of them, they require a 2-1. For some of them, they require a first class. So do I have some of the requirements that will be needed? And then some of them, besides your grade, they look at your professional experience as well. So for those that will really look at professional experience, I knew that I had more chances with them than those who are like really, really strict with the grades and all of that. So this was like my stakeholder management document that I was working on and planning. And I kept writing, increasing and writing all of those things. And then I now started looking at, okay, how much will I also need at this point to actually travel in case the funding doesn't come through, in case I don't get a scholarship. And then I was writing all of my resources. What are the supplies that I need? I'm going to need flight. I'm going to need visa. I'm going to need fees. I'm going to need accommodation. I'm going to need this, that, books, all of this kind of things. Wrote all of those things down, drew up a budget for them. I drew a separate budget for US, drew like a separate one for the UK as well. And then there was like the comparing as well. And then I now started looking at, if the funding doesn't come in as expected, and this is the money that I need to fend for myself to like get into these countries, how exactly am I going to do that? Like I said, I was looking at crowdfunding and all of those things. I wrote down the medium for all of that as well, and prospective partners for that as well. I had drafted all of these things down, and then I looked at, okay, so I have all of this document now, and I have all of these things. I have my supplies, I have the schools I want to write to. What are some of the documents that I need for myself? Now, these documents were like my personal statement, my transcript, my certificate, reference letters, and then I now started trying to write down all of those listings, all of the things I needed to do, international passport, which I already had, and all of those kind of things. And then I moved to the 3rd stage of my plan, which was the implementation, otherwise called execution, which is your 3rd phase of project management. And in this stage, really, I started bringing things to light, right? And for like some of the human resource, my husband was like a key person, because you see how you have like team members that you get to work with. So he was like a team member, my mom, all of that. And then we went into the implementation stage. I assigned like tasks to different people, things that they were going to help me do. So this is what you're helping me do. You're sourcing for these schools for me. You're looking at all of this document. I had an accountability partner who was checking in on me to see that, oh, this particular thing you wanted to do, I wanted to send applications to maybe 20 schools in a particular month. And this person was checking in on me to ensure that I was also doing all of that. But in this implementation stage, this is where you're going in and you're actually delivering the work. This is where you're working. And your implementation or execution, and then your monitoring and controlling, they both go hand in hand. Why? Because as you're doing your project, as you're delivering it, you also need to be seeing if everything is going as you planned already in the initial stage. You want to compare the initial plan that you had and what you also have now. For me, what that looked like was, okay, so I want to apply to 20 schools. I want to apply to schools in US, to schools here. At the end of the day, I had listed 3 different schools in the US I wanted to apply to. I ended up applying to just one. Something had happened and I wrote that down. So there's a risk log document that I was updating. There was a project document that I was updating. There's a communication document I was updating. There was a time I had shared a story where I had written to a school, I had applied for a school, and the school replied me, I think within 2 days, and they rejected my application, that I wasn't qualified enough because of my grade. And I had to write back to them, showing them that, oh, look at my personal statement again, look at my CV, is really loaded. So you shouldn't just refuse me admission on the basis of my grade. And I had shown reason why my grade was the way it was. I had reason for that, I had cause for that. And then for my law school as well, I have like a 2-1. So those are like different things that you can look at. And by the time I had argued my case, that school had written back to me to give me admission, a very prominent school in the UK. And all of these things, I was updating them in the document, right? Because initially I just wanted to apply to the school and move on. But that communication thing happened there where I was rejected, and then I had to make a case for myself and all of those things. So I was monitoring and then I was controlling. Because again, in your monitoring and controlling, you're looking at quality controls. You want to ensure that if you had like 3 weeks to do a particular task and you decide that, oh, you want to rush this and do it within a week, or certain things happen that weren't planned for, you want to still ensure that regardless of it, whatever you're doing is still quality. That, so for example, if you want to produce a cream or stuff like that, you want to ensure that your cream is still like of good quality. So because you're rushing to produce it or something happened that changed the entire plan, doesn't mean that product will no longer be good. So for me, I wanted to ensure that I was still able to get into like a really, really good school. I had very high ambition of getting into like a top ranked school, a school that was able to learn certain things that I needed to learn, and I did just that. But because I was monitoring the quality of schools that I was making an application to in such a way that even if some of those schools rejected me, I still have some other quality schools that were on my list, or I still had some that I had to like write back to them, building my case up, and they now decided to like give me the admission and all of that. And then there were some that after the application, I had imagined that, oh, after the application, I would just send emails like this, and that happened. And at the end of the day, that wasn't what happened. So communication changed between those schools. So for some, I was doing interviews that I didn't plan for. I was having conversation with some head of departments. I was having to do different things that I had not anticipated earlier. So all of these things were happening. And when you're working on a project as well, these are things that happen as well. So your project will not always go as you plan. And I remember again, I said one of the good qualities of a project manager is that you need to be flexible. So when you're very rigid, some things happen and you decide that, oh, this has happened, so I'm going according to plan, so I won't be able to do this anymore. For me, I'm very flexible when I'm developing and designing my project. So there's a second plan B for this, there's a plan C, there's a plan D. And if I don't have any plans at all and something comes up, I'm still going to walk away around it. I'm not going to say, oh, because I said I wanted this way and it hasn't happened, I'm going to now abandon it totally. So I got admission in US, I got funding for that. I didn't get funding for the schools that I really, really wanted in the UK, but I got funding for other courses. And at the end of the day, after all of my research, I said, oh, I was going to do social policy, no longer international human rights law. And I didn't get funding for social policy. I got funding for international human rights law. And I wasn't rigid saying, oh, because there's no funding for this, I'm no longer going to go. It's not even full funding, so I can go, or any of those kind of things. I looked for a different plan to see how I could fund myself for that social policy course, because that was what I now really, really wanted. And that was what I did. So all through this period, we're developing, implementing all of these things. I was now writing to schools, getting rejections, getting acceptance in some, sending documents that I needed to send, and at the end of the day, I got the admission. And then I started with like the visa part. This was like a different activity in my project plan as well. And then the visa part, we had to like pay for visa, we did some kind of stuff, we now started to pay for flights. All of these things were still like in the project plan, because once you get your admission, what do you do next? Then this is like your activity plan that you've planned for yourself, that by August you should have gotten your cars, you should have applied for visa. By first week of September, you should have booked your flights, you should have purchased all of the things you needed, you should have traveled and settled in that school, started your classes and all of those things. So those activities ran through, and I kept updating some of those documents and those activities, because after I got the admission and then I relocated with my husband, and then we're in that space again. The earlier accommodation I wanted wasn't what I got, so we had to improvise again. I had to stay in school rather than stay off campus, all of those kind of things. I was imagining working in a particular space. I got a job in a different space while I was a student and all of those kind of things. These were things that were happening within this stage, right? I was going to classes, the period where I was writing exams for me, passing my courses. These were all project plans for me. These were all project activities for me, because all of these things were up until the success of me finishing my master's, because the plan wasn't just about me traveling to that country and starting a master's, right? It's the start of the master's and the end of it. That was my entire project. So I was ending in 2022. So by the time I finished my courses, I did my dissertation, submitted, and all of those things. I was now checking. This was now getting to like, what is the project close looks like? And a lot of times you see people do projects and then they don't properly close the project. So at this point where I'm finishing my dissertation, this was when I was now looking at, am I owing the school anything? Am I done with my dissertation? I've gotten all of my results from the other courses that I've done. I passed them. So that's a good report on its own. I've done this particular thing. So I was updating all of those documents. I was writing all of the feedbacks, the lessons learned during all of this process, the volunteer works that I've had to do, some of the event I had to plan in school, how the whole school event turned out to be, right? All of those things were part of the entire project activities for me. And at the point where I was now getting to the close of my dissertation, for example, I was now looking at, okay, I have to now start finalizing discussions with my supervisor, my school supervisor, my project supervisor, my course mate. We're doing hangouts, we're doing parties, which in like a normal project, that would be you doing like a send-off or doing a celebration to say, oh, your project has ended and all of those things. I was now writing thank you notes to everyone who has supported me through the journey, which in the case now you'll be writing like your final project plan or report to tell your funders, to tell your investors, your partners that, oh, these are the things we've done for this project. I was now evaluating, and I did this evaluation with like my friends. We're having discussion about, oh, this was how we're imagining school to be, but at the end of the day, this is how it was. I wanted to get a distinction, and at the end of the day, I got a merit. So those were things that I had to evaluate, the reasons why I got a merit instead of a distinction, some of the things that happened during school that influenced some of the things that happened to me as well, how funding went, how self-funding myself was, because at the start, you might see like it's a walk in the park, and then at the end of the day, you see that it's kind of like difficult. It wasn't as easy as you imagined it to be. All of those things were in my evaluation document, in the feedback form, and all of that. And then at the end of the day, by the time I've looked at all of these things, I was now looking at who is owing me, who am I owing, who do I need to pay whatever to. In the proper project then, you're paying money to every single person that worked on your project, to your vendors, your suppliers. And if your suppliers are owing you as well, this is the time that they need to also pay you. And then you now start doing a proper verdict, like an auditing, reconciliation of funds. You had initially planned to spend this particular amount, and this is what you spent at the end of the day. So you want to reconcile all of that, do your internal audit, do your external audit, have conversations with people as well to just hear about their own, how they feel about how you performed during that period, because maybe there was a certain way I was behaving and maybe I didn't feel a certain way about it, and other people were able to tell me, oh, this is how you were under these circumstances. All of those things were part of my evaluation. And then at the end of the day, we had our graduation come up, our final result was out, and then the graduation was like the final close up where you said, oh, I'm done with this particular thing, chapter close, receive all of your result. I gave a speech in school talking about how my experience in school was and all of that, and that was it. And I finished my master's and I closed that book, and then I got a job. So this was my project. This is a personal project, right? And this was my personal project as to how I was able to relocate, do my master's, and end it. So this is how basically you run with projects, from your project initiation to your project close. These are some of the things that are involved in it. So with this, I hope that you're able to understand how project management goes. Meet with me next week again, and I'll be walking you through how to build your project again in a step-and-step method, and then some of the failures and some of the projects that we've had and some of the successes, what makes you an outstanding project manager. More ways that you can learn about how to be a practical project manager again, basically working in either the business or development space, will be through the course that I have currently. I have a project management bootcamp that runs for 5 weeks, and through this course I take you through the Google Workspace tool, how to use Google Workspace, how to use Asana, certain project management tools. You're able to learn the practicals of how to actually start your project and end it, how to work with different people, how to build big scale project, how to multitask across different projects that you work on. And my course basically is starting this Friday, 30th of June. Registration is still on, and you can go through and register for the course via my website, which is www.gunanyoronaloho.com. And register, be the first to grab your seat. We have a limited slot of 15 people, and I'm hoping to meet you in class so that you learn more about how to be a productive and efficient project manager. Till next time, I am Ioron-Aloho. Thank you.